Hello, everyone. My name is Nate Golden. I am a Baltimore City Schools math teacher. I'm also the president of the Maryland Child Alliance. We are an advocacy organization fighting to reduce and eventually eliminate child poverty in the state of Maryland and beyond. We believe that people are the experts of their own lives and that cash transfers are the most efficient way for families to fulfill their needs. To put that simply, we don't think any kid should live in poverty, and we trust parents that if they're given the resources to take care of their family, that they'll do what's best for their kids. Um, we do advocacy work at the state and local level. We don't really do much at the federal level. You may have heard of our local project, which I'm wearing the shirt because I'm about to head out for some canvassing, the Baltimore Baby Bonus. But we also do state level advocacy as well. And so the purpose of this video is to share with you a little bit about our legislative agenda for the 2024 session, which is coming up. Our long-term goal is monthly checks to parents. That's our long-term goal. But there's probably going to be some steps along the way. And so let's talk about what we hope for next session. The quick agenda, we're going to first talk about the federal tax credits we have for families. It's really important for understanding child poverty across the country and family assistance. Then we'll talk about what child poverty looks like in Maryland, who it affects, and how it impacts our state. We'll talk about the existing programs that Maryland already has to assist families, and then we'll talk about a more inclusive alternative at the end. And so I'm going to start by talking about the federal child tax credit. It's the biggest family assistance program in the country. And so the federal child tax credit, this is a graph of it. It's showing the relationship between how much money your family earns and how much you receive from the credit. Whether you have, it's $2,000 per kid. So the blue line is one child homes. The red line's two child homes. The green line is three child homes. There's a little typo here I'm going to fix. So there's three children. And this is what we call a trapezoid tax credit because it phases in. You finally get the full credit if you've earned enough money. And then we say, all right, you've earned enough money. You don't need any more help. It's slowly going to phase out. All right. So this is what we call a trapezoid tax credit. I have some opinions about means testing that may be relevant someday in the future. But the first thing that we're really trying to address at the Maryland Child Alliance is these phase-ins. Because phase-ins say your family doesn't deserve assistance unless you've earned enough money. And so let's talk about how this plays out. These phase-ins, these trapezoid tax credit. So here's the mechanics of the child tax credit. It starts at $2,500 in income. So if you earn less than $2,500, you don't get any help. You may think, oh, that's not a lot of money. Most people probably earn that. It's a little more complicated than that, right? Some parents don't work for a medley of reasons. Some children are raised by elderly parents who may be retired or not working. Some are raised by grandparents. Some are raised by parents with disabilities. Some are raised by parents who can't find work. And parenting is work in its own right. So there's all sorts of reasons that families don't earn that $2,500 and they get nothing from the child tax credit, no matter how many kids they have. After that $2,500, it starts to phase in at a 15% rate. So you can imagine that means like for every dollar you earn, you get 15 cents added to your credit until you reach the full amount. So if you earn $2,500, I'm going to try to write with this. You get $0, right? You haven't earned enough money. If you earn $2,501, excuse the bad handwriting, well, 15% of $1, you get 15 cents. If you earn $2,502, well, 15% of $2 is 30 cents. So now your child tax credit is 30 cents if you earn $2,500. This pattern continues until you reach the full amount. For a parent with 3 children, so let's talk about that now. A parent with 3 kids, right? This is our example. Single mother with 3 children. Her full amount, if you remember, would be $6,000, right? $6,000. So how much does she have to earn before she gets that full $6,000? Well, phasing it at a 15% rate, she needs to earn $42,500 a year. Let me say that one more time because I think it's important. A single mother with 3 kids does not get the full child tax credit unless she's earned at least $42,500 a year. Let's put that in perspective. If you're earning the federal minimum wage, that is 16 hours of work per day, every single day of the year to get the full child tax credit. That is bad public policy design. There's no, yeah. All right. Why else is it bad? Well, it's also bad because it's not fully refundable. What does that mean? Fully refundable means that if you owe or if the government owes you more money than you owe the government in tax liability, that you get that money. All right. So let's just do an example. So for an example, all right, if you owe $8,000 on your taxes, you owe $8,000, and the government owes you $2,000 from the credit, then you only have to pay $6,000 in taxes, right? That makes sense, right? That's how the credit works. But what if your family only owes $1,000 in taxes, and your family's credit is $6,000? Well, you're not guaranteed to get that $5,000 back. If it was fully refundable, you would just get those $5,000. It's not fully refundable. It's a max of $1,400 per kid. So if you have 3 kids, which is probably why your credit is $6,000, the most you can get is $4,200. So you're short $800 because your family didn't owe enough in taxes, right? It should be $5,000, but it's only $4,200. All right, so that's another reason that the child tax credit is kind of bad design. All right, this is a point I try to hit over and over with legislators. It doesn't matter how well your tax credit is designed. Some folks are not going to get it because the poorest families do not file income taxes. We estimate this is between the poorest 6 and 8%. So essentially, if your income is less than the standard deduction, you don't need to file a return. That's the law. You're not breaking the law by not filing income taxes. You're obeying the law, and because you're obeying the law, we are not helping you. So the poorest families are essentially getting no help because most of our assistance programs, besides like SNAP and TANF, are done through the tax code. Lastly, undocumented children are not eligible for the child tax credit. Children must have a social security number for their families to receive the credit. Undocumented children don't have social security numbers. But I will point out here that this is better than some other programs because if the parent is undocumented but the child is documented, you still get the credit. All right. So what are the results of all these exclusions? Well, 1/3 of children in the U.S. are ineligible for the full child tax credit because their families don't earn enough money. So the bottom third of kids don't get the full child tax credit. Think about this. We have a family assistance program where the poorest 1/3 of kids don't get the full help. The upper class families are getting it, but not the poorest. I mean, that is really questionable policymaking. And of course, there's a racial component here. Only half of Black and Hispanic children receive the full credit. So half of Black and Hispanic children do not receive the full credit. And 70% of children living with single mothers do not receive the full credit. So, we're just kind of stacking on to marginalization through the child tax credit's poor design. Now, the child tax credit is not the only, again, this should say 3. Family assistance tax credit. I don't know why we have 2 different credits. It doesn't make any sense. Some folks want to simplify these together at the federal level. But we do. And they're both poorly designed. You can see the EITC, again, is a trapezoid. It's poorly designed trapezoid tax credit. So you see the relationship here. You got to earn enough money before you get help, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully you're starting to get why trapezoids are bad. Let's clear that. So let's talk about it. What are the impacts of the EITC? Well, one, it's even more regressive towards undocumented folks than the child tax credit. Everyone in your tax unit must have a social security number to qualify. So you may be an undocumented parent with a documented kid. You can't get the EITC. The poorest 16% of households do not receive the full credit because they do not have enough income. Again, so the poorest third are excluded from the child tax credit. The poorest 16% are excluded from the EITC. And I think that's the most damning figure of the EITC. Only 3% of children living in poverty receive the full credit. It's not well designed. We can do better. Despite this poor design, though, let's talk about the state level. What does Maryland do? What do we do for families? We blindly match the earned income tax credit. And we do it in a weird way, like we do it in a regressive way. 50% of the EITC, so whatever you get, say you get $2,000 from the EITC, you get a 50% match that's non-refundable, so $1,000, and a 45% match that is refundable. These are not together. It's like we're just helping families non-refundable more. So that doesn't make any sense. Like there's no way we should be a blue state that is creating non-refundable tax credits. But yeah, I mean, you can mostly use the 45% rate in your head. So, if a family's getting $1,000 from the federal EITC, they're getting $450 from the Maryland EITC. But because the EITC has this phase in, right? It's missing the bottom 16% from the full credit, only 3% of kids living in poverty. Maryland misses the exact same families as the federal government. Baltimore City doesn't really have any programs like this. So that means every single level of government is missing the same families and children. And those same families and children are the poorest families in the state. They're the ones that are in my classroom, right? A lot of them. And so this is very personal to me. It's bad public policy. And, part of this video is demanding that our legislators do better, and you join us in this fight. And so let's continue to talk. I'm sure this bad public policy has an impact. It does. Across the state of Maryland, 15% of children live in poverty, about 1 in 7. You line up 7 kids in the state, one of them is living below the poverty threshold. These are pretty low poverty thresholds, y'all. We're talking $20,000, $25,000 a year. Your family makes $30,000 a year. You're probably not included in these statistics. And I'd say that family still needs a lot of help too. So these are families that are really struggling to pay the rent each month, to put food on the table. Again, of course, there's a racial component to this. One other thing I'll add about the 15%. Maryland has the highest median income of any state in the country. We're the richest state in the richest country in the world, and 15% of our kids live in poverty. That's embarrassing. That is a policy failure. That is a legislative failure. Marylanders of color, again, the racial component, are twice as likely to live in poverty as white residents. Again, stacking these policies, failures are stacking against already marginalized people. And of course, poverty is concentrated in urban centers. Baltimore, 1 in 3 kids live in poverty. I will say it's also very much a rural issue. Some of the more rural counties in the state have some of the highest poverty rates. And you can see the breakdown by age. Young children are the most likely to live in poverty in the state. That's also very bad for reasons we'll talk about in a second. But briefly, during the pandemic, we learned that there was a better way to do this. For the first time in American history, we really said, you know what? Parents need help. Kids are expensive, and no child deserves to go without help from the federal government. No child deserves to live in poverty. And so under the American Rescue Plan, Democrats increased the child tax credit from $2,000 per child to $3,000 for children over 5, and for children younger than 5, it's 5 and under, it's $3,600. And so increasing the amount was great. Paying it out monthly made it even better, right? Parents are getting monthly checks. But the biggest thing that mattered was that we got rid of the phase-in, right? You can see here's the prior law, this trapezoid. Here was the new law for 6 months during 2021 that got rid of the phase-in. And so families that weren't getting help before all of a sudden are getting monthly checks. Child poverty falls by 25%. Had the program existed for a full year, we would have cut child poverty in half. It's that simple. One piece of legislation cut child poverty in half. Democrats have a plan to make this permanent. It has 210 co-sponsors in the House, including every federally elected Democrat in the state of Maryland. And it basically fell too short shy in the Senate of becoming permanent law. But it doesn't look like it's going to become permanent law anytime soon. 24 election is going to have some big shakeups in the Senate again, possibly, in the White House as well. And so many states are starting to step in. As of about today, 13 states have substantial child tax credits. Maryland has a child tax credit technically, but those 13 states are ahead of us. We'll talk about why I'm saying technically, essentially in name only. And so states are stepping in to fill the void that the federal government is failing to do. All right. Just really quickly, I think most people watching this video understand this, but there is some really convincing empirical research and consistent empirical research showing that child poverty increases crime. This is a hot topic in Maryland. Poverty is not just correlated with crime, it causes crime. It increases our healthcare costs. It decreases our educational outcomes. I know this all too well as a teacher. I see so many kids not realizing their full potential because of the trauma caused by poverty. It decreases our economic growth. There was a study recently that said this costs the U.S. government $1 trillion per year. We're leaving $1 trillion a year out of the economy because we refuse to help kids. And of course, it has a pretty substantial mental health impact on kids, and not just while they're growing up in poverty, but it affects their brains for the rest of their lives. One more point I will make about this is that there's been really great research lately using this child tax credit expansion. What are the impacts? Well, a study that came out 5 days ago, maybe a week ago, that's really important. It found, and again, this is consistent, this is not the first finding on this, that if you're growing up in poverty, your brain doesn't grow as much. It slows your brain development. Kids who are growing up outside of poverty, brains are growing faster. Kids who are growing up in poverty, brains are growing slower. And they said, okay, we know that that's a fact at this point, that poverty slows your brain development. Do welfare programs work? Do state child tax credits work? And they specifically studied this, and they found states with generous welfare programs, generous family assistance programs, really shrunk the gap by about 34% between a rich child's brain and a poorer child's brain. And so we can literally impact children's brains by investing in our kids. There is probably no more important issue that we could be working on as a state. And just to really hit the point home, another study using that expanded child tax credit found that for every $1,000 you spend on cash transfer to parents, society nets $5,603 in benefits. That's a pretty good ROI. If you told an investor, you give me $1, I'll give you $5.60, you're going to take that every time. But apparently not our elected leaders, not the elected leaders in Maryland. They're not taking that deal right now. They're saying, we don't want it. We don't want to spend $1, get back $5.60. And one of I've included this table just because I think this one point is so interesting. So you can see direct beneficiaries are families with children. Indirect taxpayers. These are people whose taxes go up to pay for the child tax credit, but they get all these other benefits, right? They're less likely to be a victim of a crime. They spend less money on health care. They spend less money on their parents' health care, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of the day, even though they are paying more in taxes and getting nothing back, they are better off because it has such a positive impact on our society and our economy. So even if you never plan to have kids, you will be better off if our state invests in our children. All right. So now you kind of get it. You have a better picture of what's going on at the federal level and how it impacts our state. It's time to get a little bit weedsy and talk about the current programs that Maryland has. I briefly touched on the Earned Income Tax Credit. I'll go deeper into that. These are the programs we currently have for for families. I'm not going to go into all of these. I'm going to hit the big ones. But if you have questions about any of these, please reach out. We have the personal exemption, the standard deduction, the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, the poverty line tax credit, and the child independent care tax credit. So we're going to talk about some of these in deeper detail. The first is the personal exemption. I should have put this in the words, but the personal exemption is $3,200 per person in your filing unit. And it essentially just subtracts from your taxable income. So you can imagine, let me switch colors here, that your taxable income is $6,200 or sorry, I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to do. Imagine it's 3,200. All right, that's the personal exemption per person. So imagine your taxable income is 63,200, and you're the only person in your filing status. You're a single filer. Me, I file income tax by myself. I get to subtract $3,200. I don't have to pay taxes on the 63,200. I only got to pay taxes on the 60,000. Now it's 3,200 per person. So you can imagine, larger family, you subtract another 3,200, another 3,200, and it shrinks your tax liability. This is good, right? It helps families. But the issue is that, higher income families pay a higher tax rate, right? The highest tax rate in Maryland is 5.75%. So if you make over $250,000, your top marginal tax rate is 5.75%. Lower income families might only be paying 2%. So let's just use 1,000 for a second so you can understand this concept. If you are saving 2% of 1,000, then you're only getting $20. So this is the low income family. If you're saving 5.75% of 1,000, well, now you're getting $57.50. So this family gets more than double this family. Do rich families deserve more money? I don't think so. Should the state government of Maryland be giving more money to rich folks than low-income folks? If you don't think that's true, then you don't agree with the personal exemption. Here's how the math shakes out exactly. If a family earns over $250,000, they get $184 back per kid. If there is a family that earns $50,000, they get $128 back per kid. If a family is poor and they don't even file income taxes, they get $0. That is regressive. This is regressive tax policy. And states like Massachusetts have realized it's regressive and have gotten rid of these programs and shifted them more into child tax credits. That's what we're asking. That's a little sneak peek on our ask here. All right. What else? We also have the standard deduction. This works the exact same way as the personal exemption, and it kind of stacks. It's $4,850 for families with children. So again, it's just a subtraction in your taxable income. It's a subtraction in how much money you have to pay taxes on. If you're paying taxes on 54,000, or if your income is 54,850, well, the standard deduction in Maryland is going to let you subtract 4,850, and now you only got to pay taxes on $50,000 in income. All right, so it shrinks how much you owe. Again, how does this shake out? Like, how does it actually end up working mechanically? Well, if you're a family with an income over $250,000, you get $279. If you're a family with an income of $50,000, you get $194. So again, the rich family gets more than the middle income family. Who gets the least? The lowest income family that doesn't file income taxes. Again, this is regressive. So what happens when we add these two exemptions and deductions together? This table kind of puts it together. These, imagine 3 families. They all have 2 parents and 3 children. The poorest family that doesn't file income taxes, they get $0. They get $0 from Maryland. So the poorest family gets $0. The middle class family, $50,000, they get $578. And the rich family earning over $250,000 gets $831. I mean, this is an important question to ask our elected leaders. Why do we have policy that gives more money to rich folks than to middle class folks and to low income folks? That's the result of the personal exemption and the standard deduction. Okay, and they might say something like, oh, well, we have a child tax credit, and that's only for low income folks, which is, kind of true. Let's talk about the child tax credit. The Maryland Child Tax Credit passed last session as a part of the Family Prosperity Act. And to give you my honest opinion, it's almost kind of shocking that legislation designed this poorly would pass through so many folks. It has a welfare cliff. And so let's just talk about it. Let's just talk about the policy broadly. Only these children are eligible for the child tax credit. Children who are under 6 and children with disabilities under 17. So that's the age and disability requirement. The income requirement is that the family must earn less than $15,000. So when you combine all these requirements together, we're talking about 1.5% of children in Maryland. So it's not a substantial program. I guess we technically have a child tax credit, but it's by far the smallest child tax credit in the country. Yes, Maryland has the smallest child tax credit in the country. And the credit is $500. I should say that. But it has a cliff. And most, you go to policy school, one of the first things you're going to learn is don't design policies with cliffs. They create all kind of weird incentives for families. So imagine you're a parent, your child meets these age criteria. You got a 4-year-old. If you earn $15,000, the government's going to give you $500. If you earn $15,000, the government will say, here's $500 to help you with your kid. If you earn $15,001, the government's going to give you $0. So by earning one extra dollar, you lost $500 for your family. You netted negative $499. Tax credits are supposed to, at the very least, slowly phase out, so we don't create these weird things for families where a mom picks up one extra shift and she just costs her family $500. You can't design public policy like that, and we have to admit that we got this wrong. And again, because it's a tax credit, it doesn't reach the families that don't file income taxes. And this is it's such a low threshold of $15,000. Most families earning under $15,000 don't file income taxes. So we have a tax credit designed specifically to reach families that don't file income taxes. And the state has passed some legislation recently. It's like, oh, we're going to send you mail to encourage you to file and claim your EITC. But I'm really skeptical of that. The poorest families have to move around a lot. They're not always have time to check the mail. Their address could be wrong. I think it just shows a lack of understanding of what it means to live as a low-income person in this country. I don't think sending someone a piece of paper that might reach them is a sustainable anti-poverty policy. All right, end of that soapbox. And then this is the worst part of the Family Prosperity Act. It increased Maryland's matching of the earned income tax credit from 28% to 45%. And so this is the outcome. All right, we can say what our values are. I've talked to many legislators who say my values are that we should not exclude low-income families from tax credits. Well, nice to hear that. That's not what the policy says. That's not what the policy does. You can see the phase-in right here. You don't earn enough money, you don't get the full credit. But this is so poorly designed that it's not even a trapezoid. I don't have a word for this shape. Can I move this? So you can see right here, this is the top of the credit. This is a single parent of 2, if I didn't say that already. If you earn exactly $16,500, you get the full credit. That's the most you can get right here. It's a little less than $3,000. If you earn anything less than that, you don't get the full credit. If you earn anything more than that, you don't get the full credit. Is there any Maryland legislator who signed this into law, who voted on it, who thinks that only families that earn $16,500 a year exactly should get the full help? That's what the policy does. There's weird quirks. I'm not going to go into all these. Why? So a family earning, what is this, about $25,000, they should get less help than a family earning $27,000. It's bad public policy design. Unless we admit it, we can't fix it. First step is admitting, ooh, this is not what I wanted. I get it, right? I've dedicated the last, decade of my life to understanding these things. I get that every legislator isn't an expert, but when you're showing the facts, I hope you can admit you got it wrong. All right. So how do we do better? Luckily, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. A lot of states have already done similar things. Maryland's just got to play catch up first before we can be a leader on this issue. So these family programs that I talked about, the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, those are messy. The personal exemption, that's regressive. We spend $700 million a year on these programs for kids. What if we took that $700 million, we merged all these programs together, and we created one fully refundable child tax credit with no phase-in? So we take all these messy programs, and we just create a simple child tax credit. It would look something like this, right? It does have a phase out. That's what I should have made a graph, but I didn't. All right, so we make something that looks more like this. No phase in, right? A phase in, I'm going to draw in pink, which we are not advocating for, would look like that. That would be a trapezoid. All right, so let's talk exactly what we're proposing. We are proposing that you merge these three programs together and create a $1,000 per child tax credit. $1,000 per kid. You got 3 kids, $3,000. Pretty simple. Now, it is going to have a phase out, not a phase in. So if you earn, enough money, you may not get the full credit. It starts at $50,000 for joint filers and it phases out at 10%. So if you earn less than $50,000, you get the full credit. Imagine you have 1 kid, all right, and you earn. So your full credit is $1,000. You earn $50,000. Whoops. Is there not a back button here? All right, you earn $50,000. You have 1 kid. You get $1,000. All right, that's simple. You earn $50,001. You lose 10%. It's phasing out at a 10% rate. So you earn that extra dollar, you lose 10 cents. So now you got $999.90. And this goes on and on and on until you lose the full credit. All right, that's how this would work. That is our proposal. It is revenue neutral. Does not ask Maryland to spend any more money. Of course, we think we should be spending a lot more money on families and kids. But, we just, we're trying to meet policymakers where there are. And I don't think a bunch of new spending is where we are right now. So that is our main proposal. I will say, if you're like, hey, these programs don't make sense for families with kids, you may also think maybe we should just fix the whole deduction and credit system and make them more inclusive. So, like, if someone's interested in a little bit larger change, you could make some quick fixes to the Maryland tax code that would be both more progressive, cut child poverty cut poverty overall, and be simpler. So you can replace the personal exemption and the standard deduction with a standard credit. One benefit of this is it would encourage more people to file taxes and get more money from the federal government. That's an actual policy to encourage families to file. You can merge. So this, essentially, let's talk about what this creates at the end. You merge the EITC and the CTC. It's the same exact policy as before. It's $1,000 per kid child tax credit. The only add-on here is it's also $1,000 per joint filers and $500 for all other filing statuses. So if you're a married family of 2, you're joint filers, right? So you get $1,000 from that. And you have 3 kids, you get $3,000 from that. So now a married family of 2 is getting a total of $4,000. If that family was too poor before, they were getting potentially nothing. So a family from getting nothing from these programs to getting $4,000 is pretty substantial. Now, if it's revenue neutral, if there's going to be winners, there'll also be losers. Folks at the very top are going to lose out. All right, they might lose $200, $300 a year, but I think that's a trade-off that we should be willing to make. Right, we shouldn't be subsidizing the rich at the expense of the poor. And so this is our plan for the 2024 session. If you're a legislator, we really hope that you're interested in working with us on this issue. If you are just a Marylander that believes that kids shouldn't live in poverty, please reach out and get involved with us. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can email me. I'll include that in the video link. Thanks for listening.